There's coming a one world system. You can read about it in Revelation 13. So we have Gary Ka on the line. Eric Rogers, my co-host for this hour, and we have been discussing, and by the way, I've kind of built the interview off of an article Gary has written for his newsletter. You can learn more at GaryKah.org. Obama and the Pope. That is the name of the article, Obama and the Pope. And in this article, Gary says, so what is wrong with climate change and the Climate Change Treaty? Answer, along with the underlying spiritual deception associated with this push, which is leading people to embrace earth-centered pantheistic beliefs, the treaty itself happens to be the cornerstone of the One World Agenda. And that's how we opened the program, discussing about this is the cornerstone of the One World Agenda. Gary Ka, the thing that is troubling to a lot of us is that capitalism must go if we follow this agenda. Freedom must go. We must have the unity of all religions. The UN would be the cornerstone. So we've got kind of evil on overdrive, and yet we've got evangelicals entering into this arena, pushing for this climate change, global warming agenda. It's so wrapped up in things that are dark.
You're right. And first, people really have to understand how powerful this treaty will be if ratified. And I think most people are unaware of this. But if it is ratified, it will put in place really the international legal framework and the infrastructure for the UN to enforce the treaty at the national, state, and local levels in every country of the world. This will be a first. Up until now, the UN has not had a lot of power. It's been seeking that power, but this treaty, the ratification of it, would give it the power that it's been seeking. It will be taking a giant step really into a system of world government, the kind that we've been talking about for many, many years. But it goes way beyond the environment. It addresses gender equality, ending hunger and poverty, reducing inequality within and among countries, which of course that means income redistribution. It talks about so many different things. It's much more than a treaty just on the climate, but they've been able to work just about every facet of life into this in the name of the environment. And along with that, there's a religious element to it. And I want to share a little bit about a document that was put out by the Vatican. This was pulled together by the Pontifical Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and it was titled Climate Change and the Common Good. And this preceded, just by a short space of time, the Pope's encyclical. So it's kind of intended to set the stage for the Pope's encyclical this last summer. Now, this is a direct quote. It says, climate change is a global problem whose solution will depend on our stepping beyond national affiliations and coming together for the common good. And they use that statement a lot, coming together for the common good. Continuing with the quote, religious institutions can and should take the lead in bringing about that change in attitude towards creation. The Catholic Church, working with the leadership of other religions, can now take a decisive role by mobilizing public opinion and public funds. Such a bold and humanitarian action by the world's religions, acting in unison, is certain to catalyze a public debate over how we can integrate societal choices as prioritized under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, end quote. So this is an intentional effort coming from the Vatican to mobilize all the world's religions and bring about this false unity, all for the purpose of promoting the UN's climate change agreement and that agenda, because it will bring about a big step into world government, and that's what these people want. So it's not just political, but there's an economic side and a very strong religious undertow in all of this.
When the Pope puts out an encyclical, it's more than just a statement. It's more than just talking to the press. I think we have to see it and understand it. It's a papal brief. It's the Pope saying, this is the way it is, and this is the way it will be as long as I am Pope. You know, I think there's confusion amongst evangelicals, and certainly I think in the Catholic Church as well, about, how strongly these things should be taken. Is it doctrine? Well, it could be, and that's the point. And he's made this an encyclical. That, I think, we can't overemphasize, because that puts an extra emphasis on it that it wouldn't have any other way.
There seems to be, I think, there's a sort of a longing here for one man to sort of gain control. At my conference, I made a reference in the opening night to Henry Spock back at the NATO. This goes back to the 50s, so this isn't something I happen to remember, but I've read about it so many times. And he made a statement that because the world was starting falling apart then, he said, send us one man, be he God or devil, we will follow him. And I want to play just a 1-minute soundbite here. It's Greta Van Susteren, and she's kind of saying, as it comes to some of the crises of our 21st century, she ends up saying the very same thing in this very short soundbite at the very end. She says, send us one man, and we'll follow him if he'll figure out the solutions to our problems.
Let's all go off the record for a minute. In World War II, 6 million Jews, because of their faith, were exterminated by Adolf Hitler. The cruelty was breathtaking. And it was only after 6 million were executed in ovens and worse that many nations finally stepped in to take down Hitler. But why did it take so long before the world finally stopped Hitler? Many said they did not know Hitler had these extermination camps. They had no idea. Yes, of course, there was no internet, no Twitter, no Facebook, no cable news. It was a very different time, which brings me to now and to ISIS and Christians. We have proof, video proof. We have no excuses. ISIS is killing tens of thousands, including Christians, only because of their faith. So our generation, my generation, can either bury its head in the sand while the brutal beheadings continue, or we can stop it. And just as with the fight to stop Hitler, one nation can't fight ISIS alone. We need all the great nations, and we need one leader to lead all those nations. And if President Obama can't do it, for whatever reason, maybe Chancellor Angela Merkel or Prime Minister David Cameron, I don't care who takes the lead. I just know what's right. My generation just can't continue to look the other way. And that's my off-the-record comment tonight.
Gary Carr there again, the longing for one leader, one man with a plan, a Mr. Fix-It.
Well, right now you have this huge brewing crisis in the Middle East.
Yes.
It's expanding, and you have an international economic crisis in the making as well. And it's always on the heel of these crises when they come to a head that you have a global governing body empowered. If you study history, it tends to repeat itself. And let me take listeners through this. We had World War I. After World War I, the League of Nations was proposed. The United States did not enter in because they smelled a rat, and the people put pressure on Congress to keep us out of that organization. So it was largely a failure because of that. Not too long later, 2 decades or so later, we had World War II. What happened after that war? The United Nations was created. This time, it was put on American soil, I believe, so that Americans would be more likely to go along with it because they'd feel that the U.S. somehow is in control of the UN. And since the creation of the UN, it has been seeking more power, more authority, more of an infrastructure internationally, and a mandate to become a full-blown world government. So now as we see the current crises going on around the world, I sense that it is going to get quite a bit worse and do so quickly. And then once this all comes to a head, and maybe there will be a regional conflict in the Middle East or worse, maybe it will be a type of World War III, I don't know. But that together with the economic fallout could tip the scales and condition humanity to such a point where someone like the Pope and other political leaders around the world are going to step in afterwards and say, look, we've got to unify, we've got to bring the whole world together, all the countries of the world into a type of global government. We're a global village now. Everything's small. Technology has made things smaller. And just think, if we have a world government, countries won't be able to fight each other anymore. We won't have militaries. We'll just have one military over the whole world. This is going to come forward in the name of world peace. And for them to be able to pull this off or even propose it as a possibility in a legitimate type of sense where people would go along with it, they've got to have a coming together of the world's religions. They've got to have an integration of the global economy and agreement among the world's political leaders. And that's where this is going. And, I don't pretend to know the timetable, but I've never seen things moving forward this quickly.